This just in from the NFL, which has approved a ban of the hip drop tackle and a change to the coaches' challenge rules. The vote on the hip drop tackle was unanimous from the competition committee. Teams will also get a third challenge if just one of their previous two were successful. Prior to that, both challenges had to be successful in order to get a third. Let's bring in our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones, who is on site at the owners' meetings. JJ, a lot of talking about these new rule changes. What can you tell us about the hip drop tackle as well as the coaching challenge that we've seen already change for the upcoming season?
Yeah, Haley, no surprise here that the hip drop tackle has been banned in the NFL. That's what we have been expecting. That is what the NFL has wanted for some time, and that is what we are getting. Just got out of a press conference with some league executives, and one said that there were 230 instances of the swivel hip drop tackle this past season. We know it was the one that injured Mark Andrews, that injured Tony Pollard there in the postseason a while ago. It's not every single tackle from when someone gets tackled from behind. It's when you grab the player and then you sort of unweight yourself, you get up off the ground, you swivel, and then you drop yourself onto the back of their legs. That is what they are trying to get out of the game. As has been told to me by multiple sources, while there were a number of instances of it last year, again, the NFL says 230, you're going to see about a dozen or so flags out of that. It's one of those, you know it when you see it. And so I know that there's been a lot of concern that that officials, how are they going to officiate it? And is there going to be this rash of flags, sort of what we saw with the roughing the passer call from about 5 years ago? I'm told that's not really what is going to ultimately happen. They needed a rule on the books so that they could start to eradicate this very dangerous play out of the game. That was really the purpose for it. I think you're going to see way more fines than ultimately you see flags on the field for the hip drop tackle. So there's a lot of talk about it right now, but I would be very surprised if when we get into October, we're seeing a lot of flags for that play. So that's the big one. You know, the NFLPA, the Players Union, they were against banning it because they don't want indecision amongst their players. They don't want officials to continue penalizing in the gray area, and I certainly understand that, but a unanimous rule here voted upon by the NFL owners. Meanwhile, the third challenge is something that the Detroit Lions proposed, really interesting one. So before, coaches got two challenges, and if you were successful on both of those, oh well, you didn't get, or excuse me, you did get a third challenge, but that was it, not unlimited challenges. Well, now what the NFL is going to allow is if one of your challenges was successful, so even if you had an unsuccessful challenge in the first two, you still get a third. And so really, you get the opportunity to get another crack at it, if you will. So a smart one. The league doesn't like adding in a whole lot of challenges that will slow down the game, but this was one that ownership narrowly approved. I was a little surprised that it got approved. It was a narrow approval, needing 3/4 of the vote, but they got that one.
Some changes already in effect. Of course, there could still be a potential for even more changes to the upcoming season. That includes, of course, the kickoff potentially changing. So, JJ, what else can you tell us about that rule as well as other things that are being discussed at owners' meetings?
So the kickoff rule is really the big one. That's the big ticket item here at this owners' meeting that really is a bit of a ho-hum meeting otherwise. They are going to vote on it, and I believe they're going to vote on it tomorrow. And it is a radical change. It is a drastic change in the NFL. What you're going to have are players lining up way down the field. It's the XFL kickoff. We've been talking about it for weeks now. But the kicker is just going to kick off to one or two returners. He's going to loop it over those 20 players that are down there, and then it's going to sort of encourage returns. There's no more fair catch. If you kick it out of the back of the end zone, the ball is going to go to the 30 or 35. They're still tweaking all of that. So they didn't vote on it yet. And here's why. They're not sure that they can get 3/4 of the NFL owners to ultimately agree to this. Roger Goodell is very much behind this. Troy Vincent, the Executive Vice President of Football Operations for the NFL, very much behind this. Health and Safety Committee, the Competition Committee, Special Teams coaches, all of them are behind it. But you still have to get 24 of these 32 votes. And so they feel that they are close on it. But the NFL doesn't like radical, drastic change. They like change that happens over time. And so this is going to be a huge change. Look, we're not going back to the old kickoff where you're just running into people and you have the high potential of head injuries. Instead, what you are going to see is something that gets some juice and excitement in the kickoff. It keeps the foot in the game, but you're going to have fewer injuries. At least that, of course, is the hope. So we'll see if it passes. The NFL is somewhat confident that it is going to pass, but until you have that vote, you don't really know. I do know that coaches and general managers, they want this rule, if it is going to pass, they'd rather it be in place now ahead of the draft than having to wait until the May meetings to potentially include that, because it's going to change how you construct your team, how you construct your special teams, who you bring in as returners. So all of those things up for debate. There will continue to be very healthy debate, including unintended consequences and things that we're not seeing with this sort of rule. That's something that John Harbaugh has discussed a number of times and made his voice known and heard. But again, I would expect a vote tomorrow, and we'll see if you get 24 votes.
So many changes to keep our eye on. Thankfully, we got you, JJ, keeping us updated. We certainly appreciate your time from owners' meetings. Now, I mentioned it earlier, the social media world reacting most notably to that hip drop tackle change. Here's what JJ Watt had to say. Just fast forward to the belts with flags on them, insinuating that football is leaning more towards flag football in the future. You also got Dolphins quarterback Javon Holland weighing in on the conversation, saying breaking news, tackling banned. So it has been quite the talking point. And we've got our guy Lige Douzable also tapping in here, sharing news from our Josina Anderson, saying SMH football isn't football anymore. So let's bring on Lige Douzable, former NFL defensive lineman. Duz, I got to be honest with you, this has been quite the hot topic on social media. We, of course, just saw the reaction from other defensive players across the league. It's very clear how you feel about this, but I want to just give you the floor here to talk about this new change.
Haley, to me, this is a ridiculous rule because JJ brought up a good point. He talked about the roughing the passer rule and when it went into effect. The thing is, it's a subjective call. That's the thing. Where's the black and white in regards to refs making this call? Now you put them in a precarious situation in regards to making this call because, Haley, we've seen this happen in the past. And when the NFL puts an emphasis on something, there's an overcompensation for it. So now it seems like if it's even teetering the line of quote unquote a hip drop tackle, it's going to be a flag, right? So as a defender, how am I supposed to tackle somebody from behind? You brought up the point about the Mark Andrews injury, right? Well, that was a safety trying to tackle him. Mark Andrews outweighs that guy by 30 or 40 points, and he's trying to stiff arm him. What is a defender supposed to do in that situation? I think that we tend to forget, Haley, why a lot of people tune in to watch this game. Is because it's more physical than any other sport in the world. They are taking the physicality out of football by implementing rules like this. And as a defender, I heard JJ say they don't expect to see a lot of flags, but they're gonna be a lot of fines. So now you're taking food off somebody's table for doing their job, essentially. Because again, when the offensive player is running away from a defender, what is the technique to bring him down from behind while that offensive player is trying to fight to get extra yards, and yet you're trying to prevent him as a defender from getting extra yards? Again, Haley, to me, this is a ridiculous rule.
Yeah, it's caused quite the stir because it's challenging, right? To your point, it takes away from the defender being able to prepare because they're now processing how they can tackle versus the offense maybe having a little bit of an unfair advantage. But it does feel like from the league's perspective, they are trying to focus on player safety here, but it's almost coming at the cost of the integrity of the game. So in your opinion, what's the balance as the league tries to make the game a little bit more safer without taking away from the fact that football in its entirety is a violent sport?
And I'm so glad you brought that up, Haley, because I understand the element part of it of trying to negate or minimize some of these injuries. But like I stated before, Haley, we have to remember that football is a physical sport, right? It's a violent sport, and injuries do happen. Now, again, you want to try to mitigate or minimize those, but in certain scenarios, injuries just happen. It's a part of the game. We always had a saying in the locker room, like football is 100% injury rate when you're playing because you're going to eventually get hurt playing this game. That's just how physical and violent it is. I think as players, like people tend to forget That's what makes football football. That's what makes it different from basketball or soccer or football if you're in another country, or baseball, the physical nature of the game. And one more thing to add to that, Haley, we've seen the scoring go down in the NFL, and we've noticed over the last few years that the NFL's kind of favored the offense when it comes to certain penalties. We talked about roughing the passer penalty, right? What does that do? It gives the offense an extra bite at the apple, right? You get a 15-yard penalty, yet the offense gets to stay on the field. One that comes to mind was that sack that Grady Jarrett had a few years ago on Tom Brady, when it was just a routine tackle, and they end up scoring after that drive and losing that game to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we saw that scoring was down this past year, right? The hip drop tackle, who does it benefit? It benefits the offense, because not only did you get a penalty, you get an automatic first down after they're going to call this penalty. So to me, like, everything is already slanted so much to the offensive side. As a defender, how do you play football? You can't touch guys after 5 yards. If you hit the quarterback just a half second too late, or you land on them, even if somebody's pushing you from behind, it's a penalty. And now when fullbacks and tight ends and running backs are running away from defenders and throwing that stiff arm to them, when you try to drop your weight to slow them down to prevent them from getting extra yards, now it's another personal foul and a penalty. Again, as a defender, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah, it is difficult, just to your point of finding that balance, but player safety has to come first, and I guess that's where the league is leaning with this rule. We will, of course, continue to monitor the changes as they come through, but Lige, we appreciate your time and your insight on this conversation. For more Football Fix, this has been a wild day of news out of the owners' meeting, but you can stay up to date with all the latest in the NFL by tapping in to the Pick Six podcast. Sports writer Will Brinson and the crew get you ready each and every day with what's trending in the NFL. You can scan that QR code on your screen or listen in wherever you get your podcasts.